Hello again. We just have seen with Nicolas that it is possible to develop tools that aren't led by anthropocentric imaginaries. The search engine he has presented is a search engine that does not refer to the imaginaries of codes and of writing. Rather, it carries the non-anthropocentric and technological imaginary of graphs. I speak of technological imaginary because graph is the way the web is organized. Graphs are particularly suited to the way computational machines act. A computer, indeed, can be understood as a power of systematic exploration of a finite set of possibilities that can be huge. A computer runs through decision trees, formulas, data, etc. And it stops when it's finished. It's the reason why graphs, even very huge graphs, are particularly suited to computational machines. They can run through all the links connected to a node and explore all the paths. With Aleph Search Clear, we develop a tool that takes into account computational expression, that is to say graphs. We think that this consideration for a technological way of being, for a technological imaginary, can be very productive. That is what Christophe here is now going to show. Technological imaginaries of graphs can open some interesting way of thinking. Humans can learn from this graph being. It opens up new imaginaries and potentially leads to what we can call a graphical way of thought. The tool Christophe here is going to present is a tool that enrolls the technological imaginary of graphs. But first, who is Christophe? Christophe here is Christophe FAGOT. He is a computer scientist who is COO at Intactile Design. And he is going to present a tool called STEMIC. And STEMIC is a visual intelligence tool and a concept map creation. As Christophe is now going to show you, by using STEMIC, you have the possibility to draw maps of situations in order to visualize their complexity. STEMIC, the tool he's going to present, enrolls the technological imaginary of graphs, but also puts the user at the heart of the tool. It thus succeeds in avoiding the enslavement of the human being by the technique, as well as the instrumentalization of the technique by humans, as tools led by anthropocentric imaginaries often result to. Christophe is going to show how humans can develop a graphical way of thought by using tools that rely not on the anthropocentric imaginary of code, but on the technological imaginary of graph. So now we are going to listen to Christophe.
Thank you, Cleo. So before to present STEMIC, I will read you a quote I like to read, and it's a quote that said once one of our users, and it's written in English, in French, so I will translate in English. And she said that STEMIC allows to see how we can give to feel, to see, and to understand the complexity in order to act on that complexity. And the word act is really important. Just to summarize a little bit the story of STEMIC, we are a design company, meaning that we want to create tools that allow the users to deal with what they have to do. And by saying what they have to do, I mean that we are interested in users who are thinking. If I use a little bit of my history in thinking, I like to separate our history in three parts. First, when we are kids, and I have kids, we are in school until our, let's say, 10 or 12 years old. Our teachers learn us how to write some text. So they explain us that we have to start our imagination, our thoughts with a beginning and an end. And we have to write in the right order, the right words, the right sentences. But when you ask a kid how things are in his mind, they are not in a linear way. They have in mind some places, they have in mind some characters, they have in mind some ideas, some tools, some toys, and they all are connected. But the teachers ask them to write it in an order, in a given order. And sometimes it happens that at the end, the teacher said, no, it's not the right order. But in his or her mind, there was not order, just connected things. So once we are no more in the little classrooms, let's say now we are teenagers, we have 14, and then our teachers explain us that we can divide our thoughts. So we create table of contents for our text. We use, I don't know if everybody's familiar with some mind map tools. It means that you put a subject in the middle, and then you can divide the things you have in mind in some smaller parts. So it works well. You can create the table of contents of your PhD document. For example, if you want to write a PhD, you can create books, and you have the first chapter, the second one, and so on. But once again, this is just to tackle a problem we have when we use some linear thinking tools, because we always have in mind some connected and interconnected things. When a writer creates a story, we have a lot of characters. Just imagine Game of Thrones, for example. And I don't think that someone thought about Game of Thrones and as just a tutorist with lots of characters. But these tools are, yes, well useful for something where you can split the thoughts and the imaginaries. So as designers, what do we do when we think about imaginaries? We just try to look for some people and look what would they do if they would not have some tools, if they would not have some computers. So some people having big imaginaries of, for example, cops. When you ask them how they try to find a killer or a thief, you go and you see their walls, and on their walls there are some images, some pines, some drawings, some links, and what they do is that kind of thing. They have an interconnected and systemic way of thinking. So when you talk about imaginaries, you first talk about how to connect different concepts, different characters, different things. And you never in the first step think about how I will write it. So you need to have some tools where you can put in it the things you have in mind the way you have them in mind. My imagination is not the same as yours, I believe. I'm a computer scientist, so I talk about the lines of codes. You're not a computer scientist, so you have much more concept to deal with. But if we go and see some example of the way that we allow our user to use their imaginary, let's see that example. So I apologize again, these are some French articles, but I will try to translate about. This first article has been written just to study the investments of Qatar in France. And we have in there a big text where they explain that the Qatar buy a lot of companies, a lot of sports, for example. They buy some clubs, they have investments in the medias, in newspaper, like beIN Sports and so on, and they write down a lot of data. That part is the part where we collect the data on the web, and you can do that with Google, for example. You type on your Google Sheet investment of Qatar in France, and you have all that data. If we see another writing, it was a special report. The title is, does Qatar want to buy back France? Here, they use, again, some data. They write things. So if you want to understand what's in that paper, you got to read all of that, and you will follow the flow of the imagination of someone called a reporter. We don't know who it is. But at the end, the conclusion, and I love that conclusion, is the danger for France, only, it's a long story, is the Football World Cup. And this is the conclusion of the reporter, because it's about his imagination. So now, if we want to know, or if you want to figure what's in the mind of the reporter, it's impossible. We just have the conclusions. In STEMIC, what we do is that we take all that information, or we allow the reporters or whoever information, and we show them that you can have a tool where you can handle your data and you can build your thoughts. How do we do that? First thing, we create maps or graphs. So we enter QSI. QSI is an investment company from the Qatar. And we here enter the results we found on Google. Where do QSI invest in France? Well, they invest in Paris Handball, Paris Saint-Germain Football Club, beIN Sports, Al Jazeera, and so on. And we say that they own that thing. When we put that, we do what Google gives us as results. If we look at the way Aleph networks provide tools, they provide that kind of representation. They directly tell us that QSI is linked to Paris Handball, Paris Saint-Germain, beIN Sports, Al Jazeera, and they split it. But now I will try to be in the skills, this is the way we say it in French, of the reporter. I will say that in my mind, in my imagination, I will create some categories just to indicate that on that graph, so in my mind, I got two different kinds of objects. Some are TV channels, some others are football clubs. I'll just do a little pause in there. This is one of the possible interpretations of a situation. Because if I am not in that way, but I imagine that, for example, I'm an economist. For me, as an economist, all that information are not about sport clubs and about TV channels. They are just companies. It's another kind of imagination that I can put on the same data. But the message I want to give is about TV channels and football club. And then in my mind, I will describe something in a various way. For football clubs, we will have some revenues. We will have to know in which country they play. And for everybody, there is a difference if you play in France, in England, or in Ireland, especially for taxes, for example. And you want to describe further things and the objects, like the kid who wants to describe a character. Is it a man, a female? What kind of object do we handle? Is it a big car, a small car? We have some attributes that will affect to our object, not because it's funny to give them, but just because it can be used for our story. And then here, I have a small description of what I have in mind. Well, I got to remember that IS1 is sponsored by Qatar Airways. It's just a note for remembering. If I still goes to work, in my mind, the things are connected that way. And sometimes, in my imagination, I am a little bit lost. And trust me, for computer scientists, it happens a lot. So I need to find in what context I talk about IS1. Just click on it and go there, and I see that for the moment, I didn't connect that club to anything in my graph. And when we talk about imagination, we always have two ways of dealing with the stories we have in mind. Either we have a small picture, this is the previous view, that you have all the details, but you also need to have the big picture. And I never saw Game of Thrones. I know it's bad. I know that everybody told me that I had to see that movie. But if I want to discover that show, I won't ask the details. I will ask someone to explain me what is the big picture. And you just need to zoom out. If I read a text, if I read one of the articles, we saw it's impossible to have the big picture. Except if I read the abstract and I got to follow what the reporter got in mind. So I will read his interpretation. Let's continue. And in my mind, my imagination, sometimes I want to group some things. I just don't want to explain why I group them, but in my mind, I put them in a bag, I put them on the side, and I would deal with them lately. Maybe I will bring them back in my map. Wow, that part is just a funny one, because in my mind sometimes it's black. It depends on my emotions. It depends on my mood, yes. Another part, and it's where it starts to be complicated, is the things that we have in mind or our imagination, we want to share it. This is for me, the talent of the writers. This is the talent of the movie makers. They have something in mind and they have the skill to write it in some novels. They have the skills to put them on the screen, to bring us in front of the screen and to see a movie for 2 or 3 hours and just to know what they have in mind. But those skills are very rare. I don't have it. I don't have that skill, but if I can share you that map, you don't need much time to see what, in my mind, is the interpretation of the 2 articles or the data I found and how, in my mind, I structure that things. And once again, it's because I've chosen to look at the situation based on football clubs, on investment structures, based on big companies where the Qatar has decided to invest. And sometimes there are some things like the Palais de la Méditerranée, like the Concorde Lafayette, that I didn't interpret at all. For the moment, it's just somewhere in my imagination and it's not connected to the rest of the things, but at a time, I will put some relationship between them. So I can send you that map, you can see that map, and you will know how I see the situation. And you probably won't agree with my point of view. But based on that, I can, oops, sorry, I can understand that there are some very bizarre things. If I say to you that a conflict of interest is a cycle in a graph, meaning a part in a graph where you can find a loop. If I just explain you that, when you take an article, so a linear way of thought description, it's hard to find. But if I show you what I had in mind, then you will all along find that here we have a loop. Just for the story, it means that the Qatar is both, has both shares in Airbus Group and is also a customer of Airbus Group. There are no judgments in that. It's just a fact. But this is what my imagination shows about the situation. And STEMIC is nothing else but that. Just to allow people to put on a screen the thing they have in mind, the way they have it in mind. And if we need just a few words to explain why we work with IF networks and with Nicolas, as we see it here, we create the graph by hands. There's no automatic layout. We don't plug ourselves on a big database that would bring a visualization that is supposed to talk to me. But Aleph Network and the tool that Nicolas shows you allows to help me to build that things and to find the information I need. Just for example, if I put on the map the Qatar, QIA, and let's say Airbus Group, they will detect that there is another company here, Qatar Holding, that links both of them. They will indicate it. And it's my choice with my imagination to know if I want to take it in my conclusion and to put it on my screen.
Okay, so thank you very much, Christophe. Just maybe one word to give a little conclusion. With STEMIC, but also with Search Clear, we hope that we have shown all the benefits to step a bit aside from the anthropocentric imaginaries. By taking into account the way computational machines exist, we can open new imaginaries, the ones of graphs, and make some room to the way our thoughts are interconnected.